The distress signal arrived the same way bad news always did, quietly, politely, and at the worst possible moment. Captain Cole Hargrove was chewing an unlit cigar when it happened. He sat in the cramped war room of the Pale Knife, a corvette so ugly it made enemy targeting systems second-guess themselves. The holographic display above the table pulsed blue and gold as the ship's AI. A crisp, faintly British construct the crew had named Percy translated the incoming signal in real time. Unidentified broadcast, Percy announced, repeating across all civilian frequencies. Translation is available, Captain. Hargrove tilted his chin toward the display. Let's hear it. The alien voice that spilled into the room was raw with fear, clipped by static and utterly unmistakable in its desperation. Assistance required. Research Station Orvath 9 under attack. Non-combatants aboard. Medical research is critical. Request immediate aid. The message looped. 7 humans sat around that table, and not one of them looked like they belonged in polite company. Tattoos covered forearms and necks. Eyes glowed faint amber or silver from nanotech optical grafts. Scars mapped careers that no official record would ever acknowledge. To a casual observer, they looked like trouble wearing body armor. To anyone who knew better, they were worse than that. Hargrove let the message play a third time, then reached forward and killed it. So, he said, setting both palms flat on the table. Somebody out there is screaming for help. Corporal Andy Jenner, demolitions specialist and perpetually stormy about everything, raised a hand. Permission to state the obvious. Granted, it's a trap. Jenner spread his hands as if presenting a gift. 100% textbook obvious trap. Noted, Hargrove didn't argue. He looked at Doc Halford instead, medic, biochemist, former combat surgeon, current holder of the crew's only functioning moral compass. What do you think, Doc? Halford adjusted the stim injector clipped to his belt, expression thoughtful. The Orvath system runs one of 3 known stations studying the gray rot. If whoever's on that signal is actually doing what they claim, we're talking about cures worth more than entire planetary fleets. He paused. If it's a trap, we dismantle it. If it's real, those people are dying. Either way, the math isn't complicated. Briggs, the team's sniper, stretched in his chair until something in his spine cracked loudly. So, standard Tuesday. Delgado, their pilot, sipped her coffee without looking up from the navigation slate in her hands. More like Friday night at a deep space truck stop, you know the kind. Bullets, screaming, someone's ship on fire. Percy cleared his throat, a habit the AI had developed entirely on its own and refused to explain. I should note, Captain, that if this operation ends poorly, Terran Command will issue a full denial of your existence. I recommend minimal recklessness. The entire room laughed like people who had heard that line before and were still not concerned. Briggs raised his flask. Thanks for the pep talk, Percy. Really lights a fire. Hargrove clapped the table once, sharp and final. All right, hooligans, strap up. We go in quiet, assess the situation, and try not to blow up anything that belongs to the people we're saving. He stood, cigar clenched between his teeth. If we win, nobody hears about it. If we lose, nobody hears about that either, he grinned. Same as always, let's roll. The Pale Knife wasn't built for ceremony. It was built for speed, stealth, and the specific kind of violence that left no paperwork. Delgado had the ship sliding through Orvath space within the hour, her boots resting on the console edge. One hand draped lazily over the manual stick. The Orvath system opened on the main screen. A pale orange dwarf, a loose asteroid field, and one ring station hanging in mid-orbit like a broken crown. Fires glimmered in 3 of its pressurized domes. Hull breaches vented atmosphere in 2 more. The station was dying in slow motion and something was helping it along. Rail gun scoring on the outer hull, Delgado said, sitting up straight now. Somebody's been carving patterns. Malik, the team's heavy gunner, leaned over her shoulder and squinted at the magnified image. Those aren't patterns, that's a name. They're marking what they plan to take. Rourke, Terran Special Operations, 6'2", built like a bridge support, cracked her knuckles. Finally. I was starting to feel slow. Halford didn't look up from his med kit. There are civilians on that station. Please try to explode only the things that deserve it. Rourke grinned at him. Doc, I'm offended. I only ever explode things that deserve it. That is factually untrue, and you know it. Percy ran the hostile identification in the background while the crew geared up. His voice came through even and calm. Confirmed combatants are Scarath, cybernetic insectoid, armed and organized, approximately 30 units based on thermal readings. Station defenders appear to be non-existent at this point. Hargrove checked his rifle, racked it, and slung it across his back. 30 against 7. Percy run the odds. I would rather not, Captain. Smart. They docked under stealth in a shattered hangar bay on the station's dark side. The ramp hissed down into wreckage, melted drones, twisted supply containers, and dark streaks across the deck plating that Hargrove chose not to examine too closely. He stood at the top of the ramp and looked at his team, masks on, rifles up, faces unreadable. Delgado stays with the ship, he said. Everyone else calms hot and lets rock. We clear corridor by corridor, and we find the survivors. Move fast, move quiet, and for the love of all things Terran, don't shoot each other. Jenner muttered. That only happened once. Twice, Briggs said. Let's move, Hargrove said, and walked down the ramp. The first Scareth contact came before they'd cleared the hangar. The creatures poured from a collapsed maintenance bay, 8 of them, moving fast, mandibles clacking against reinforced jaws, limbs ending in plasma nozzles and serrated blades. They shrieked in a frequency designed to disorient biological targets and opened fire. Plasma bolts raked the deck. Contact! Briggs was already down on one knee, rifle up. His first shot took a Scareth through its optical cluster. It dropped without a sound. Rourke lobbed a grenade with casual precision. Special delivery. The blast sent 2 more skidding across the deck in pieces. Malik stepped forward with the auto-cannon braced against his shoulder, expression serene. Therapy session is now open, the cannon hammered. The remaining Scareth came apart. Halford had already pulled a dazed alien behind an overturned cargo container. He checked it for injuries with practiced efficiency. I leave you people unsupervised for 30 seconds, he said flatly, and it's already fireworks night. Hargrove walked through the settling smoke, both rifles lowered, still grinning around his cigar. Relax, Doc, they started it. That is not the reassurance you think it is. They pushed deeper into the station. 2 more contacts in the service corridors, quick, brutal, over before anyone had time to feel nervous about it. The Scareth weren't poorly trained. They were simply encountering something their tactical models hadn't accounted for. Jenner set charges on a sealed bulkhead to bypass a locked section and stepped back as Hargrove gave him the nod. Small charge, Hargrove said. Naturally, Jenner triggered it. The bulkhead ceased to exist in a radius roughly 4 times what anyone would call small. That was not small, Halford said. It was small for me, Jenner replied. They found the survivors in the medical research wing. A cluster of Olith, tall and bioluminescent with shifting scale light, and a smaller group of Eridni, whose crystalline frames chimed faintly when they moved. They were barricaded behind overturned tables and equipment racks, and every one of them flinched when the door came off its hinges. Then they saw the humans. A tall Olith researcher stepped forward first, scales cycling from pale yellow to deep teal, distress shifting toward cautious hope. Her voice was careful, measured. You answered the signal. Hargrove slung one rifle. We were in the neighborhood. Who sent you? What authority do you represent? He considered that. We're independent contractors. Rourke stepped around him. Galactic Pest Control, you had an infestation. We sprayed, Briggs added from the back without looking up from his rifle's scope as he watched the far corridor. Think of us as janitors. Janitors with better equipment. The Olith researcher, her name, she offered carefully, was Vess, stared at them with large, luminous eyes for a long moment. You are Terran. Last time I checked, Hargrove said. An Eridni child, young enough that her crystalline ridges hadn't fully set, peeked around Vess's leg and stared up at Hargrove with pure, unfiltered fascination. Where are you from? Long way from here, Hargrove said, crouching to her eye level. Place with bad weather, good food, and a long tradition of punching problems in the face. The child processed this. That sounds painful. Halford, already moving through the survivors with his med kit open, said without turning around. They're very good at it. Vess watched the humans move, Malik setting up a firing position at the corridor entrance, Jenner checking the room's structural integrity, Briggs climbing a storage rack for elevation, with the look of someone revising their understanding of the universe in real time. Your research, we study the gray rot, the phage sickness, the scream plague. That is why the Scareth attacked. They want to weaponize what we've built. Hargrove's jaw tightened slightly around the cigar. How close are you to the gray rot alone? Months, perhaps less. Vess met his eyes. They must not take this work. They won't. Percy's voice came through the comms, measured as always. Captain, I'm reading a second Scareth formation moving through the upper service decks. Approximately 22 units armed with heavier plasma ordnance. They appear to have identified your entry point. Hargrove stood and looked at his team. Malik chambered a new belt without being asked. Rourke began pulling explosives from her kit with the focused joy of someone who had found their calling. Jenner was already calculating angles. Briggs settled into his elevated position, exhaled slowly and said, 22. That's a better number. The second assault hit with the force of something that had been building pressure for hours. The Scarath came down the corridor in a wedge formation, disciplined, coordinated, the heavier units at the front absorbing fire while the flankers probed for gaps. They were smarter than the first group, and they knew the layout. What they didn't know was Rourke. She had spent the intervening minutes turning the corridor intersection into a physics problem. The answer to that problem, when the Scarath triggered the first charge, was fire, force, and a very loud noise that shook dust from the ceiling across 3 separate sections. 3 down, Rourke called out gleefully. Malik's autocannon hammered from the doorway. Working on the rest. The surviving Scarath split and pushed harder. A plasma bolt took out a wall panel 6 inches from Hargrove's head. He ducked, came around the opposite edge, and put 2 rounds through a Scarath that was already raising its nozzle arm. Halford was moving through it all low, fast, dragging a stunned Eridni researcher to cover while the firefight raged around him. From his elevated position, Briggs called out numbers with the calm of a man narrating a sporting event. 14, 13, 12. A pause. Nice shot, Rourke. I'm not counting that one. Yours was too close range. It absolutely counts. 12, Briggs repeated. The Scarath commander, bulkier than its units, carapace armored with secondary plating. A different frequency in its shriek came through the breach in the intersection wall when the flanking attempt collapsed. It had clearly decided that if tactics weren't working, size would have to do the job. It was not a small creature. It moved like something designed to end arguments. It found Hargrove standing in the middle of the corridor. He didn't run. He rolled left as the commander's blade arm swung, came up inside its reach, drove the barrel of his rifle upward under its reinforced jaw, and pulled the trigger twice. The Scarath commander's momentum carried it forward another 2 steps. Then it stopped. Hargrove stepped aside and let it fall. Behind him, Briggs's voice floated down from the storage rack. Boss unit, does that count as extra credit? It counts, Hargrove said. The last 4 Scarath retreated in the direction of the station's docking ring. They made it approximately 30 meters before Jenner's second charge removed the corridor segment they were standing in from the conversation permanently. Silence settled over the research wing. Not the comfortable kind, the ringing, disbelieving kind, where everyone checks their hands to make sure they still had them. The survivors filtered back out slowly. Vess stood in the center of the medical lab, looking at the humans with an expression that had moved well past simple gratitude into something more complex. The Eridni child had attached herself to Hargrove's side like a small, crystalline shadow, watching his every move. You fight like something out of old stories, Vess said quietly. But you laugh while you're doing it. Halford looked up from his work on a minor burn across Malik's forearm. Coping mechanism. Don't read into it. I have been reading into it since they walked through that door, Vess said. How can killing be entertaining to you? Rourke leaned against the wall, arms crossed. It's not the killing, it's the problem solving. The killing is just how the problem ends sometimes. Jenner added, also the explosions are objectively satisfying. They really are, Rourke confirmed. Vess looked at Hargrove directly. You could have ignored this signal. Every empire in this sector would have. Your own government will pretend you were never here. She paused. Why did you come? Hargrove took the cigar from his teeth, looked at it, and put it back. Because you asked. The Eridni child tilted her head up at him. Her crystalline ridges chimed softly. Will you come back if we call again? He glanced down at her. Something in his expression briefly wasn't a grin. You focus on those cures, he said. That's worth a lot more than anything we do. You fix what's broken from the inside. We just handle the noise. He straightened. But yeah, if you call and we're not dead, we'll come. Delgado's voice came over the comms, unhurried but pointed. Captain, station defense grid is coming back online. We have a window of about 8 minutes before docking sensors catch us. Hargrove touched his earpiece. Copy that. Warming up, he looked at Vess. Station's going to be patched through to the nearest Olith authority within the hour. Percy's already sent the coordinates of the Scarath's external docking point. Their ship is still out there, crew of 3. None of them dangerous without the ground team. He pulled a small data chip from his vest and set it on the lab counter. Percy also compiled everything he could pull from the Scarath commander's tactical uplink. Might help you figure out if there are more coming. Vess picked up the chip carefully. Who are you people? Hargrove was already moving for the door. Nobody you've ever heard of, he said. Tell anyone who asks that the Tooth Fairy handled your bug problem. They won't know what that means, but it'll bother them for weeks. The ramp of the pale knife sealed behind them with a hiss of pressurized air. The ship's stealth systems engaged, and the Corvette slid out of the broken hangar bay like smoke through a keyhole. By the time the station's sensors fully rebooted, there was nothing on the scanners to find. Hargrove settled into the co-pilot's seat as Delgado took them out of the system. The crew was bruised, operational, and running on adrenaline fumes. Malik had a bandaged forearm. Jenner had a scorch mark across one cheek that he was already calling a scar. Briggs was still muttering about kill counts under his breath. Percy, Hargrove said, mark the Orvath system in the return visit file. Already done, Percy said. I also took the liberty of logging the gray rot research frequency. If they publish a cure, we'll receive notification. Hargrove looked at the stars going long and bright as Delgado pushed the drives. Good, he said. Back on Orvath 9, Vess stood at the observation window of the repressurized lab. The fires were out. The station's skeleton crew was already assessing repairs. The crystalline voices of the Eridni researchers filled the corridor behind her, quiet, shaken, slowly returning to work. The Eridni child appeared at her elbow, staring out at the empty stretch of space where the pale knife had been. Who were they? The child asked. Vess considered the question for a long time. Terrans, she said finally, humans from a planet called Earth. She paused. They are loud, chaotic, and completely unreasonable. But they came. Yes, Vess's scales shifted to a slow, steady gold. They always seem to. The child pressed her small crystalline hand against the glass. Outside, the stars were still and quiet and impossibly vast. Somewhere in all that dark, a very ugly Corvette was already running silent, already gone, already looking for the next signal on an open frequency. The child thought about that for a while. I'm glad they exist, she said. Vess put a hand on her shoulder. So am I.